Good morning. It's 8:30, and I'm going to call the Clay County Board of Commissioners meeting for May 28th, 2024 to order. First item we have is approval of the agenda, and would like to note that item 2 has been removed from the agenda.
Request to approve the agenda with the
I'll second the motion.
We have motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Next is citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens that want to address the commission on any item that's not on the agenda? Steve, do we have anybody online?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Next, we have approval of payment of bills and vouchers.
Move approval.
second.
Have motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Just have a
Aye.
comment.
Whoop.
All right, I just had a comment on that. I had brought it to Steve's attention. The per diem sheet is not on there individually.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Moser, I did have a chance to talk with Mike Clark. The pay, there's 3 pay periods in this month, so technically it wouldn't be in this month's packet. I did talk with him, and he did receive approval from Lori, so
Okay.
that would be coming for signature.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Have motion and second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next, we have approval of minutes from May 14th, 2024.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and second. Any discussion or changes? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, next up, Justin Sorum, County Engineer. First item Justin has today is approval to advertise SAP 014-597-003 and 014-597-004 and HEI 1915-0083.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I am requesting approval to advertise for the projects that you had mentioned. So the city of Dilworth received bridge bonding to replace 2 structures in Dilworth, crossing ditch 50. And as required by state aid, the county must act as the sponsor because they are not a state aid city. So this has no financial implication to the county other than us just opening bids and making payments to the contractor and then getting money back from state aid. So this would be City of Dilworth funds, Buffalo Red River Watershed District funds, and bridge bonding.
Do you know where they're located at?
Second
Second Street and Fifth Street?
and Fifth, and I can't remember where the HEI one is, but it's those 3 crossings of ditch 50.
Okay.
Any other questions for Justin?
And then the letting date would be July 2nd.
Move to advertise as requested.
Second.
Have motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, Justin, the next item you've got is request approval of a memorandum of understanding between the Metro Flood Diversion Authority and Clay County.
Yes, good morning. So up on the TVs, I do kind of have a map that kind of shows what this MOU is pertaining to. So this MOU is between Clay County and the Diversion Authority with respects to the 37-foot road raise projects that will be constructed north of Moorhead. And I guess I'll just open it up for any questions you may have regarding the MOU. I did bring Chris Bockyguard with me from the Diversion Authority. And then just as a note, this has gone through highway tracking a couple of times, and then the attorney's office did review it as well.
Okay, any questions for Justin or Chris?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Mojo.
Okay, thank you. Specifically since I worked more with the MOU on the south side of the project in the townships, just want to ensure there was good township dialogue as we crafted the needs up there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
That was easy, Chris.
Thanks for showing up.
I think we talked about this multiple times at highway tracking, and I think it's, all of the correct. Yep. Yep. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, next we have a request approval to appoint 3 members to the West Central Regional Water District Board of Directors. And Steve Larson, our county administrator, will be teeing this off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you recall, at the beginning of this year, this board approved Commissioner Campbell and Commissioner Gross to be part of the steering committee for the West Central Regional Water District, again, to provide guidance and direction in establishing the direction from, along with Norman and Polk representatives. As we've gone through this process, we're getting to the stage now where there's been some funding dollars that have been provided to this project, and we're in need of having a board. We had a meeting this past week, and ongoing discussions where the steering committee proposed that there would be 9 voting members as part of this board. Polk County would have 4, correct? Clay County 3, and Norman County 2. And so it was brought forward as a recommendation at this time that Commissioner Campbell and Commissioner Gross remain as the appointee, and we also look to have a citizen representative. As you're aware, with many of our other water districts, at some point the goal would be to have all citizenship membership, but at this point, with the establishment of the boards and the funding, and felt it important to have representation from our commission. That I'd yield for any questions.
Any questions for Steve? Commissioner Campbell?
Steve, have you put out a request for interest?
We will based on today's board's action.
Okay. I think the timeline was I think they were hoping to have names by the
Well, I think it's
Meeting
our
in
next
June.
meeting, I think, isn't it?
for their meeting in June, which is, June 20th, 4th, or whatever that Monday
So,
is.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Campbell, our hope would be is that we would run this ad for a couple weeks, and then if there be multi people interested in that, bring them before the commission for your consideration.
And I know early on in the process, Steve Slick from A2S had contact with a lot of rural residents, and I think they had gathered a list of potential people with interest, and I gave that list to you, so we will reach out to them as well, right?
We will, yes.
Because I just want to make sure, not always do people see these public advertisements that we might do for interest, so, okay.
Any other questions for Steve or comments? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we ask staff to advertise for recruit citizen members for the West Central Regional Water District.
Does your motion include keeping you and Commissioner Gross on as 2 of the members at this time?
Sure.
I can make that motion.
Yeah, let's do that one separate, I think.
Okay, so we'll deal,
Second his motion for the direction for staff.
okay. Any discussion on this motion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Commissioner Gross and Commissioner Campbell to the watershed, or Water District, West Central Regional Water District Board of Directors.
And I'll second that since the other 2 commissioners we have present are part of the motion. Any discussion on this?
And I think that's fine. I just think that the way the process is going to work out, once all three entities have established their names, there will be resolutions that will be submitted with would have all three members on it that would come back. So there's going to be an additional resolution anyway, but I think that this shows the intent to who our county representatives will be, and I think that's fine.
Very good. Any other comments? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Very good. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Next up, Michael Leisure, Assistant County Attorney, and Erica Frank. We're going to have a public hearing regarding the cannabis zoning ordinance. Do I have a motion to move into a public hearing?
So offered.
Well, looking at it, we are, I'm sorry,
We were just catching that too. We're a little early for this public.
we can go to,
I'm going to rescind my motion.
let's see what we've got that we can do. I guess we could do some committee reports. And I believe we're going to start with Commissioner Gross, if memory serves me, but let me double check. Yes, Mr. Gross, Commissioner Gross, if you'd like to start us off.
Okay, Tuesday, we had a PIC meeting. Again, things that we discussed there, it's on the agenda today. So we'll get to that later. As far as Quinn Chager will be here to request change in eligibility workers to temporary lead. The other thing that was discussed was hiring bonuses for deputies in the sheriff's department. No definite decision was made on that I'm aware of. I don't know.
We have a pick this afternoon, or after board today, or excuse me, public safety meeting after that today.
Okay.
I knew we had another meeting.
And on Wednesday, we had officials training on what to do, what managers are supposed to do in case of an emergency. It was a 2-hour training. Commissioner Ebinger and myself, Steve, were there for that. Hate to say anything, but I don't know if we picked up too much information there, but I think we're pretty much set with Gabe. I think Gabe has pretty much everything in order. That afternoon, we had groundbreaking at the fire department in Dilworth. It was pretty well attended there. They're starting well. Of course, you drive by it out there, you're going to see that there's quite a bit of stuff being done already. We also had highway tracking that day. And there again, we discussed what we just approved here. Also, that night, I went to the Linden City Council meeting, and nothing new to report from there. They're just getting ready for their Linden Days and stuff, doing other types of stuff that pretty much pertained to the city. Thursday, we had a meeting on the Heartland Trail. There again, when you remember the Heartland Trail, we tried to just get that going about 4 or 5 years ago, and we never really got started too good then. Now they're coming up with about 4 different routes that they want to go across the county, and they're going to hold meetings with different stakeholders that are involved in that. And it was just the first meeting, the start of things. So we're going to hear a lot more about, there's a person that attended there that concerned, I think, about snowmobile trail going across his land. So there's going to be opposition to some of those trails that they got provided, They had one provided going about a mile north of Dilworth, heading out towards Hawley. There's some opposition to that, and I think most of the opposition is to the Northern Trail. So they're probably going to try and go to the Buffalo State Park, trying to find a route through there and get some easements. So it's going to be a lot more meetings to get that thing going again before it's going to go. And I don't know if we originally had about $2 million to study that trail thing, but I don't know if they ever got that or used it. So gonna take some money to even do it. I guess my concern is having to put it, you have to build it for snowmobiles too, that trail, that bike trail. And if you're gonna put a pavement, make this trail, make it pavement, it's the first place the ice is, or the snow's gonna melt on, and I think it's gonna be a tough sell, but hopefully we can make it. Those are my meetings.
Thank you. Commissioner Mojo.
Thank you. Last Tuesday, I attended the Planning Commission meeting. It was a long meeting. We did have a long discussion in regards to the ordinance, cannabis zoning ordinance component that we'll be discussing today. The irony of Willie Nelson being in town on the day in which we had that hearing was not lost on many of us. Good insight and perspectives from the folks on that board. We did have a couple other hearings that had good, vibrant discussion. I attended the Prairie Lakes meeting that Commissioner Campbell always does a great job of updating on. Good insight in regards to website development, making sure that we tell the story of what good that facility does for the trash in our region and the benefit that it provides so that the public can access that. I also attended Thursday morning the Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting, good updates and discussion there. And briefly called into the briefly called into the MCC JPA meeting that was held that afternoon. I did have some resident questions in regards to farmland leases, small grains questions on that. And Friday, we had a special call of the MetroCog board meeting. We did have, let's see, the purpose of this meeting was to approve consultant selections for 2 planning studies that was approved. It was a busy week, and that's my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you. On the 21st, we had a Highway Tracking Committee meeting, and again, I think the only item on the agenda was the MOU with the Diversion Authority regarding all of those properties primarily in the northern part of the county. And I guess maybe we should have had Chris talk a little bit about it. Seeing as how we had so much time, but I think it's important for the record to show that there were several iterations of what road closures should be, or road raises should be done. And ultimately, there was some of the original ones that were proposed no longer are, and then there were new ones added. I think the map that was up on the screen indicates that. And the primary goal, of course, is this area would be impacted by the 37-foot levels of flooding that would come through the city of Moorhead and then go north. And what we wanted to make sure is everybody would have ways in and ways out in that particular scenario of flooding to 37 feet. And so some of the original ones were no longer needed. Some of them ended up impeding with floodways, but there was still, in all instances, there were always a way in and a way out for those residents. I think one of the big ones is going to be our Highway 26 and County Road 1, that intersection there. As we know right now, we're redoing County Road 1 as we speak, and as it joins up with 26, there's going to be some new structures required there. That was anticipated when Justin did the County Road 1 project. Part of the difficulties up in that area, when we talk about the 37-foot flood with the Red River, This is also where the Buffalo River has a tendency to overspill and flow to the northwest. And, so there's some areas of flooding that can be caused by the Buffalo River and not the Red River. But in all of these instances, it will still show, as a matter of fact, here it shows even in the 37-foot flood, Highway 75 might be underwater in a couple of areas. But it's probably as a result of the Buffalo River and not the Red River. So at some point in time, they just converge and become one great big swamp, lake. So with that being said, I'm glad that that's done, and there was a lot of work put into it by Justin, and I want to thank him for that. And then we had our Prairie Lake Solid Waste meeting on May 24th, Wednesday. We go through our plant manager report. Again, the financial condition is doing well. We're about $70,000 below last year in terms of cash available. We still have $1 million in the internal service fund, which is good. The Clay County, the Clay County deliveries were only 24 tons down. That probably could be in the black today. 10 now? Okay. So, and again, at one time, that was 1,600. And so every ton we're down, we're still paying those tipping fees on that. So kudos to Corey and everybody there for maintaining that and getting it back to where it's supposed to be. We had more discussions about ash management. There's, as we know, and we've talked about the ash landfill that all of that ash from the Prairie Lakes incinerator goes to is in Otter Tail County, and that is filling up, and so we're trying to look at alternatives. Alternative B would be to expand that landfill, which we require a permit from MPCA, and there's an awful lot of work involved, which that process is still going to be done, just in case this Plan A doesn't pan out. But Plan A is to make sure we have the clean ash, and we're working with our highway engineers within our 5-county partnership to be used in road surfacing, road subsurfacing, I should say. And it's, we've had an awful lot of, different, like Stantec and those companies to help determine would it be a quality product, and in some instances it's better than some of the other products that are used. So we're hopeful that that I think that primarily the roads that'll be used for will be in Otter Tail and Becker County, because the transportation is a lot cheaper there to transport that, for example, to County Road 1 in North Moorhead wouldn't make sense because the transportation would outweigh its benefits in terms of finance. So that's looking good. All the engineers have been involved with this process, and we have an $850,000 grant application in with MPCA to use this as kind of a pilot project. And if this works, it's just another way to keep less things out of the ground and reuse them. So, then we had, as Commissioner Mojo mentioned, we had the website discussion. There's two components there. There's one where, just like our county employees here use, we have what we call the intranet, where employees can go on and they can find their own information about their own policies and benefits, and if they have, they can pretty much answer their own questions by going on to that. They're looking at doing the same thing there. And then the other part would be the website for the public to view, and people can go on there and better understand what Prairie Lake Solid Waste is, and that, it is a waste energy facility where we take garbage from, for example, from Moorhead and Clay County, and we send it to Perham, and it's turned into steam, which the Perham businesses are buying and using very effectively. So that's in the process. The quote to do that website, to build that website, was $5,000, and then there would be a $35 monthly fee once it's done for hosting the website. And the 5-county board believes that it's a worthwhile investment long-term, but because we would be asking Otter Tail County to assist with the work that would be involved with it, we wanted it to go to the Otter Tail County Commission to get make sure that they're okay with it, seeing as how we would be asking their employees to help with the operations of the website. Trying to get us to the public hearing. Next, we had the Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday morning, and Corey gave us, of course, we had some discussion about mattress recycling. We have, Corey's looking at some options there about partnering. Again, Becker County has a facility where what do they do with it? They grind them up? Deconstruct them, yeah. They deconstruct them, and so Corey's in the process of seeing if we can work out an agreement with Becker County but we'd have to truck them there, is that right, Corey? Yeah. We'd have to, so we'd, in essence, and I think actually our, I don't know if you have it on here now, today or not, but, okay, it's not on here yet, but we talked about then needing to have a trailer that we could put all these things in, and the SWAC has already approved, recommending the approval of getting that trailer. So I think maybe Corey's not quite ready to bring it before the board, but anyway, the mattresses, of course, in their present state, when we go to the landfill, they just take up a lot of space there. Then we had some additional updates from Corey, and then I gave an update on the Perham project, which I just gave to you folks here. And then on that afternoon at 1 o'clock, we had the MCC JPA meeting, and as we are usually, we got our property acquisition status report and all what we've completed and what we have yet to complete to finish the project. Minnesota litigation update. I think we have a couple more that are going to be going to court. I think it's around the last week of July. Then we did approve a Bowser consent agreement, and we had reports from all of our land agents, and then we approved the 2024 farmland leases and done a minor contracting action with one of our contractors. After that, that same day, then we also had the Diversion Board of Authority meeting. I think, we talked about what we expect, what's the process for a new executive director. And so that process is moving forward. We had a significant discussion about an employee handbook. There were actually in HR, there was actually, the Diversion Authority had basically implemented Cass County's HR policy. When the new executive director came on, he incorporated another HR policy that was a standalone policy for the Diversion Authority. However, that policy was never brought before the Diversion Authority Board, and so it was really never formally acted on, and so it had no validity. But unfortunately, in that process, some of the hires were hired based on information that was in that particular HR policy. And so we've directed staff to come come up with a plan, and, you know, Cass County is really important in this area because they are the official, and so whatever changes were made, we gotta make sure that that does not have impact to all of the other Cass County employees, so it's kind of a little nest of issues that have to be resolved, and we're confident it'll be able to get done. And then, you know, we had our construction update, Corps of Engineers update, and then we ended up going into two closed sessions, one dealing with contract issues and another one also then dealing with the executive director position, so. That was that, and I believe that concludes my report, and it's 9 o'clock.
Bingo. I'll say my report. You got us back on schedule, Kevin. Okay, at this point, next up is Assistant County Attorney Leisure and Erica Frank on public hearing for a cannabis zone ordinance, and I'll entertain a motion to go into public hearing.
So move.
Second.
A motion second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, take it away, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We also note we have Mr. Bang here with us from Solid Waste.
Make sure your microphone's just close. Thanks.
Is that better?
Yes.
We also have Mr. Bang with us this morning from Solid Waste, as he has a small but important role to play in this ordinance that we're bringing before the board this morning. Mr. Jacobson, of course, would love to be here. He's not able to, but this is how many people it takes to replace Mr. Jacobson to bring this information to you here this morning. So bear with us while we try to fill in for his big shoes. So, as the board knows from the materials in your packet, this is a project that we've been working on. The Planning and Zoning has been chiefly working on the last month or so, trying to get ready for some changes in Minnesota law that are coming up this summer. It's been my pleasure to help support them in that work, and along with Mr. Bang. So we will jump into the presentation here. So the retail sale of cannabis is set to begin in 2025, and the bill was, I believe, was signed into law regarding licenses prior to 2025. I believe that happened last week. So the purpose of considering cannabis zoning regulations now is to provide local regulatory options and to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of our citizens. Under the comprehensive plan goals and objectives, of course, we have the agricultural component to recognize and protect the agricultural character of Clay County, the commercial and industrial component to encourage commercial and industrial development in harmony with the ag and rural character of Clay County. To promote the incorporated communities of Clay County as prime locations for commercial and industrial development. To encourage commercial industrial development to locate within the incorporated communities of Clay County. So we're encouraging that, of course. So more in depth about our agricultural goals and objectives. We want to support the long-term protection of the county's strong, diverse agricultural economy, to maintain an environment that supports agriculture at all scales throughout the county, recognize and support the agricultural character of the county in our planning efforts, and to ensure that new development is compatible with the character of Clay County's agricultural areas. So there's sort of three parts to this, and some of our commissioners were here at a meeting we had last week that I think's been mentioned in one of the commissioner reports, along with the sheriff and some other folks from the county. And the first major thing we need to consider, and is addressed by this proposed ordinance, is the issue of cultivation. And as you'll note in your materials, and also what we discussed here today, a lot of what we've incorporated into this ordinance comes out of state statute. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel other than what's been done already in St. Paul. So cultivation means the growing and the harvesting, packaging, and transportation of cannabis products. So under the statute and what we're proposing in the ordinance, the size limit is up to 30,000 square feet for indoor operations and up to 2 acres for outdoor operations. These cultivation operations require plans and site plans, and they require licenses. These licenses can be held for multiple things. You can have a license for manufacturing, medical cannabis cultivation, industrial hemp, event organizations. The licensing aspect of this will all basically come from the state, and it's expansive. The omnibus bill, the completed one, is about 85 pages of print about this big. So there's a lot of information in there, and some of that, like I said, is being incorporated into this, but the licensing part is something that we really won't be getting involved too much with. So there's cultivation, then there's manufacturing. To purchase, make concentrate, artificially derived cannabinoids. Am I saying that right? I've been struggling with that word for a month. Cannabinoids. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. Manufactured products and to sell to other cannabis businesses. That's under the umbrella of manufacturing. Again, operating plans are required and licenses are required before you'd be able to do that under the ordinance. The third piece after cultivation and manufacturing is retail. That is to sell cannabis and cannabis products. Standards for operating hours like lighting, security, building conditions, when deliveries can be made, and other prohibitions are considerations when dealing with the retail aspect of this. Retailers may operate up to 5 retail locations. And I think this is a nice reminder point as well that, this ordinance deals with the unincorporated areas of the county. So, for instance, say the city of Moorhead might have, and I suspect will have very different ordinances that govern their cannabis policies and businesses. So we're only dealing with county areas here. There's micro and meso businesses. These small businesses can cultivate, manufacture, and retail. They are allowed to go under all 3 pieces of that umbrella. They're small, as the names indicate, and do allow for the on-site consumption of cannabis. There was some questions from one of our work group sessions about tax classification. I think Commissioner Moser, that might have been something you were concerned about. You'll see this is addressed here. We ran that by Lori Johnson, and have this tax information for the board. I'm a lawyer, so taxes, numbers make me go cross-eyed. So any information or questions you might have about taxes, hopefully are answered by this information, but I know that Lori Johnson would be more than happy to talk more in depth about that as well. So here's a land use chart having to do with cultivation, manufacturing, and retail. Again, those are sort of the 3 areas that we're concerned with for zoning. You'll see that some of these areas are not permitted for these activities, and some would require conditional use permits. So here's where a decision will likely need to be made by the board, is how exactly to consider cultivation, whether cultivation will be zoned as industrial use, which limits it to the highway commercial and limited highway commercial zoning districts. It's also staff's recommendation to add wholesale to this use table, as wholesale of any product is currently permitted as a conditional use in the development code. And you'll see that language is in our proposed ordinance. So Cultivation as agricultural opens up some different issues that we want to talk about. Of course, there's pros and cons to just about everything in life, and that's also true for our cannabis ordinance and zoning purposes. Some of the pros of zoning it in the agricultural column would be to diversify the agricultural base of the county and offer more economic development investment opportunities in the county. There's certainly some cons to this proposal as well, like land use conflicts, greater visibility throughout the county. It could exacerbate externality costs like crime associated with some of these places, or youth access, pollution, and water resource impacts. Could potentially increase hardships on law enforcement, public health, solid waste, and planning and zoning office. It would just be far more widespread. So there's only one Matt Jacobson and only one Erica Frank, and they can only be in one place at a time. So it'd be hard to keep an eye on some of these operations if they're spread out almost throughout the entire county. So cultivation as an industrial use, there's pros and cons to this as well. We'd be able to concentrate greater oversight and regulation on these areas, again, just by keeping them to a handful of places. Obviously, it's easier to make regular visits to these places. These might limit potential for pronounced externality costs. There'd be less less potential for land use conflicts because they would only be these, I think, is it 8 spots? Some cons to putting it under the industrial column might be limits the diversification of agricultural base, reduced opportunities for economic development, and commercial zoning districts are more visible to the public. So I think that's sort of the trade-off there is if the board feels that visibility is a good thing or a bad thing, it might sway how you feel about zoning it industrial or agricultural. So these are, I might hand this slide off to Ms. Frank. Ms. Frank, can you help us understand what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so the top left is just a map showing, these all show maps of the areas that in blue, highlighted in blue, that could be potentially have the right zoning to allow for that use should they come for a CUP. So the top left is south of Moorhead there. Nurture Nest Daycare is off to the left along Highway 75 and 50th Avenue. Down south on the bottom left is that Kurtz Township Highway Commercial Zoning off Highway 75 and 80th Avenue. On the top right is that highway commercial area that's east of Dilworth on the south side of Highway 10. And then in the bottom right is down south of the Moorhead Airport. The top left is in the corner of Minnesota 9 and US Highway 10 on that southeast corner. On the bottom left is the town site of Downer. There's a strip through there that was an old railroad bed that has the main line, some storage units. On the top right is, there's a highway commercial area off by the aggregate pit on 170th Street North. I think they had other business plans in a previous time and had gotten it rezoned highway commercial. Nothing is currently on that site. And the bottom right is west of Holly. There's a strip right on the west side of Holly and right on the west side of their airport.
And Ms. Frank, am I right in saying again that these 8 spots would be where these businesses could be zoned if they were classified as industrial instead of agricultural, correct?
So these locations all have highway commercial and limited highway commercial zoning only. So these would be the areas where anybody could come to get a CUP, request a CUP for the manufacturing and the retail. And then should you choose to put cultivation on that same zoning district only, would be the only locations for that as well.
Any questions about that from the board? I sort of think this is part of or maybe the crucial aspect of all of this. At least it's one of the crucial aspects. Any questions about that so far?
Do we have any indication whether those who intend to produce cannabis are going to do so in an interior hydroponic or interior grow houses, given our weather, Or are they going to try and grow it like a crop outside in fields? Do we have any indication where the interest or the practicality of this goes?
I think that's part of the uncharted territory we're in, Mr. Chair, that I would hate to guess. Certainly with a little bit of shared law enforcement background, I think we might have our suspicions that might be more indoors,
Yeah.
but that's certainly not based on any scientific research.
I didn't realize we had 8 areas that could sustain that, whatever growth they need for, to meet a market. But,
Well, and as a market factor, and we might have 0. We don't know how many, if these places are conducive to that kind of business or not. They might try and fail, or they might not try at all. They might all go for it and go gangbusters. It's hard to say.
Commissioner Mojo.
Gangbusters.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a fairly substantial conversation at the Planning Commission regarding this and the pros and cons of either classification. And certainly since we're recognizing and trying to protect the agricultural character of Clay County, did it make more sense to go that agricultural route? Certainly there's some questions in regards to crop rotations and that piece. And then there was obviously some discussion on the commercial industrial and I understand the nature of retail and how we all have our own beliefs on this as well. Part of the concern was that, did we want this to be Clay County's highly visible businesses, particularly on large commuter routes? And I'm just not sure if we want to make sure that every highway commercial zone in Clay County has a business like this. And I understand that we're not regulating that they would for sure be in every single one, but, I just think food for thought particularly, if we went the agricultural route, and I'm not exactly sure where I really stand, what makes the most sense. Maybe that would steer production in more of that kind of avenue than the covered hydroponic component that you talked about. Again, I think there was maybe 50-50 split on the Planning Commission as to what made the most sense. Certainly, we're all in uncharted waters, and it's difficult, but those were just the feedback from the discussion that we had Tuesday.
And as hard as I try, sometimes I just can't quit being a cop. And the potential for criminal activity in an exterior grow, this isn't kids stealing watermelon. Without fencing, lights, security cameras, all of that. And I don't know how you do that if you're growing things by the acre. There's going to be a thriving black market, as we've seen in other states that have legalized, where there's no taxes applied, and any of the product that could be stolen and processed would be sold. It's not a matter of having a legitimate retail outlet. If you can sell it cheaper, people are gonna buy it. If you take it right across the river, there's nothing but a black market there. It's just, that's my concern, is I think if we treat this as an agricultural crop, it's gonna have grow operations that are more susceptible to having their crop get into a market where we can't control who's using it. And to that end, I mean juveniles. That strikes me right on the top of my head. If we go with treating it as an industrial process, I think we can put the regulations in there to have a secure facility. Still going to be problems, but I think there'd be markedly less than if you've got somebody growing an acre of marijuana. Any other comments or?
I think to that, I just want to comment that we do have the ability, once we get to the planning permitting component, to make sure that those concerns are added in. We frequently require round the facility fencing for storage units, camera security, lighting for storage units as well. So we do have that ability once it gets to that place to make sure that those areas, and I certainly appreciate and understand the issues that Commissioner Ebinger brought up. I think part of the other component was that then if you're adding those in those corridors, you are more susceptible to businesses maybe not investing in that because they don't want to be next to those. You will have daycares and other facilities saying, well, we're good not going in these areas in the future because this is what Clay County's wanted to put in. If you see on that Highway 75 corridor, there's a thriving daycare that has added in there in the last 5 years that has even gone through expansions on the one in the north or the top left corner there. So, we have to think a little bit about what will our actions do to limit future development and growth. And those were all, I'm sure, very important items that the legislature thought thoroughly through when they gave this to us to deal with.
My question is, do we have to approve a cannabis ordinance?
You don't have to. If you don't, though, then you lose some ability to regulate it at a local level. So, for instance, Commissioner, maybe if I could just go to the next slide. This is actually a really good segue to the next slide. We have the ability through our local ordinance to limit retail establishments to 1 per 12,500 population of the county. So it's been the direction I think that staff has received to implement that into our ordinance. If we did nothing, we would not have this ability to limit these businesses. So I think that your cities, well, certainly the cities are free to have some other number or no number at all. And they might not pass ordinances at all or could pass ordinances that allow for more businesses. But what we're doing here with this ordinance is taking advantage of the opportunity to tightly regulate and even control the number of these businesses.
So we'd have about 5. We'd have about 5 in Clay County.
5 or 6, I think 6. And we can use the establishments in the cities to count towards that quota. So as for these retail establishments, it might be all but eliminated in the county.
These are retail, not grow operations.
Correct. Now we're switching gears a little bit.
Yeah, grow operations, no limit.
In a different category. This is over to the side retail. Yep.
But although we can't regulate the number of grow operations other than through our zoning and requirements.
Correct. Just like anything else. And that's, county's not overrun with feedlots either. So,
Yep.
all depending on who you ask.
If we don't have an ordinance, we're basically relying on the state to regulate this for us.
Well, in essence, there would be no regulation. It's a number of retail businesses
I agree.
if you didn't pass one. Now, having said that, Commissioner Gross, if you want more time to think about these things, we can table this and come back around. This is not the house is not quite on fire right now type of situation where something has to be done today where we're bringing you an emergency. That's not the message we want to be sending.
Like I said, I was just wondering if we do nothing or not approve anything, does the state have some sort of regulation, but we have to give out so many licenses or something? Or,
If you do nothing, then there's nothing.
I mean, they wouldn't be allowed to do anything. And,
No, they'd be allowed to do as much.
As they want.
no,
Other way.
I guess that's what I was wondering.
Sure, I understand. So, again, that was a great segue to the retail issue and the importance of the ordinance. Some other things to note about the retail would be that cannabis businesses are prohibited as a home occupation. There are setbacks to these establishments. You can see there. We have added 500 feet from a church, daycare, library, or residence. Residence is not in the statute. We felt like that was something that the board might appreciate seeing in the ordinance. So that is something that is not quite copy and pasted from the statute. That is something we've added. 500 feet from residential treatment facilities, 500 feet from a park, playground, or athletic field. So there are some setbacks that could make it hard in some of our smaller communities or smaller areas to even establish a retail business just because of these state statute setbacks. 500 feet is a lot of land in Felton. So,
Would the cities be able to come up with their own ordinance and basically remove themselves from this being, our ordinance being applicable?
I believe so, Mr. Chair. So, general standards applying to cannabis and related cannabis product cultivation, manufacturing, and retail. Again, licensing, we've touched on that a little bit, is required, if applicable, prior to establishment of the use. There's the issue of nuisance. The use must not establish a nuisance in the form of noise, vibration, glare, fumes, odor, lighting, or other interference detectable off premise, just much like any other type of industry or business we might be discussing. Again, these proposed standards are directly from the state statute. Cultivation and operation plans include site plans, security, wastewater and waste disposal, utilities, water usage, recycling, solid waste, pest management. For manufacturing and wholesale, again, site plan, security, wastewater, waste disposal, ventilation, and filtration, solid waste. These are taken from the statute. Considerations for retail, again, from the statute. Nothing invented here for our ordinance, other than adding residences and the setbacks. But all these sort of plans are required for these operations. So staff recommendation, based on our research and work with different workshops and the Planning Commission, would be to classify cultivation as industrial and allow as a conditional use in the highway commercial and limited highway commercial. Then cultivation will be assessed as a commercial use. Ventilation and filtration is repeated in the proposed draft ordinance under the retail performance standards. We could strike the duplicate occurrence from this subsection. I think that's, do they have the new version?
They have the old version.
Do we have a new one we can distribute? We have a new, with some of this last second language added for you that's updated from the one that's in your packet. We'd like to distribute to you at this time.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think that just of note, as kind of was alluded to earlier, the challenging part for our group in getting together is that the Office of Cannabis Management is still in the process of being stood up. And so to Commissioner Gross's comments, there is a call to action from the standpoint of needing to minimize, I guess, to that wild, wild west aspect. I think the challenging part gets to be is that there still aren't complete answers yet from the state because they don't have them. And so it isn't this group's wanting to not be able to provide you answers. In some of the cases, we just can't yet. And so, but yet it's extremely important from our perspective to make sure that we consider the ordinance.
I'd like to piggyback off of that thought too, just that because this is all so new and some of these offices aren't even up and running yet, we would expect this ordinance to be something that's revisited frequently in the coming years. This might be something we come back once a year on and tweak, make changes. Some of these changes might be made for us by state law. So this is to get us something basic on the ground to offer some of the protections we've talked about going forward here at the onset, with the understanding of this is not the last time we'll be having discussions about this topic as the board and various county departments. That's the end of the slides, Mr. Chair. So we're again, if there's any questions, we're certainly willing to do our best to answer any of those questions you might have for us.
Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you. Are there any other, I'm looking at the cannabis used by zoning district, that page. Is every zoning district described here, or are these the only ones that would pertain to this use?
Those are the only ones that would pertain to this use. The other ones, like such as resource protection, biological was left off, because likely you're not going to be wanting to till under any of that sort of biologically significant area. Another one that was probably left off was the urban expansion district, tier 1 and tier 2, because those likely would not want to have permitted use within them.
So the way this is defined, these are the only areas that there could be
Correct.
the potential for use.
Yeah, yep. So in that first section in the ordinance, under section 1, A is breaking down where the cultivation of cannabis shall be permitted, the zoning districts. And then B is the breaking down where manufacturing, wholesale, and the sale of cannabis-related products, what zoning districts it can be in. We just put it in a table format for the presentation, just because it's a little easier to read.
And so in all of these instances, the cultivation, manufacturing, or retail would all be under a conditional use permit.
Correct.
It's the only way that they could receive a permit to, and that would go to answer, or at least the concerns that Commissioner Ebinger addressed. There could be stipulations within that conditional use permit, and it goes to the lighting and all of that, fencing and all that type of stuff could be required as part of the conditional use.
Correct. Yes, that's within the standards, is where all those requirements would have to be included on any application made for a conditional use permit.
Based on the state statute, are there any things that we can't limit?
Not sure what you mean, Commissioner.
Well, in terms of putting conditional uses on.
Well, just like any other use, if the county starts making it, invent a phrase, unduly impossible, we could see some challenges.
Like, we have to allow it,
Yeah.
basically.
Okay. That was what I was wondering. Are there certain instances where we have to allow?
Yeah, essentially a conditional use, if the property is allowed to have a conditional use, it's likely to be a permitted use within that district. There might just need to be a little extra conditions applied to each individual unique property to permit that use. But yes, it's generally should be a permitted use if it's a conditional use permit is allowed.
So for instance, we can't make a 2,000-foot setback that would negate any of these highway commercial uses in, say, like Downer. Well, that covers the whole place. So
Right.
things like that. No, that's not allowed, and that's not allowed for cannabis zoning or any other type of conditional uses that we deal with. So I would also note, just reminding that you'll see in these in the ordinance solid waste and ventilation, wastewater, all those things that we did consult with Mr. Bang, and he is here to answer any of those questions as well. We've appreciated his input in working with us on this. Those parts come from the solid waste.
Wouldn't mind hearing what your observations on that are, Corey.
My observations, Mr. Chairman, are there are no rules. I reached out to the MPCA and they didn't have anything yet. They were working on it. They would write their rules once the state got their portion of it done. What we added to this ordinance is just two simple things. One, it's got to be secured at all times, and it has to be deemed unusable before it can be brought to me. I don't want a dumpster full of potentially usable material that kids could get into. So those are the two items we added. And how they deem it, or how they make it unusable, is completely up to them at this point. Some other places require to be ground up with other material, stuff like that, but we just left it intentionally vague as there are no rules from the state.
And Mr. Chair, I think this goes to the comments that Mr. Leeser made earlier, where once the MPCA comes back, that's will be one of the adjustments that we'll have to make the ordinance.
I think, and just from our meeting we had last week, this can be work in progress for a while. And I don't, right now, the state has not given direction. There's a framework out there and there's some hypotheticals, but that's what we're dealing with. As a border community, I just really see a need to where we not stand on the throat of progress, but we try and have some rules in place and some structure here within the county that we can adjust as the state does so. I'm looking at this, and from what I can see, we're saying that highway, commercial, and agricultural, and industrial would be, I'm sorry, highway, commercial for retail. For the production, it would be limited to agricultural and to highway commercial, or no, agricultural and what districts would you be allowed to cultivate? Industrial and agricultural under our ordinance?
It depends on which way you decide to break down cultivation, whether it should be classified kind of as an ag use and be allowed in ag general, or if it should be just limited, same as manufacturing, wholesale, and retail, to just the highway commercial and limited highway commercial zoning
So
district.
that'd be the decision of the board before we actually can have an ordinance.
That's one of the main things we're here today on,
Okay.
is to have you all make that decision.
Anyone else?
And again, I don't mean to say today as in you have to do it today. I don't mean to say that. Again, if people want more time, that's of course within your purview.
I have some opinions on this, but certainly if there's a desire among the board to table it and take more time, that's fine, but I think we need a specific identification of the things we want to know and need to know as part of that tabling.
Well, I think we still have to have public comment
Yeah.
here on this one.
I know.
Yeah, we're still in the public comment. That's the staff's presentation piece of the public hearing. So, and any other questions as we've been sitting here and discussing before we let other people comment if there are any?
Any questions? Any member of the public want to comment or give us input on this? Ken, just step up to the podium there and we'll make sure your mic's on. And state your name and address.
Good morning. My name is Ken Lucier. I'm at 1222 North 19th Street here in Moorhead. And I wasn't aware when I came to this meeting that we were going to talk about this, but it really is an interesting subject. And I know you guys are going to have a difficult time trying to work out an ordinance. As Commissioner Ebinger states, we're next door to a different state, a different county, and that adds a little more some problems that you wouldn't otherwise have if you were in the middle of the state. My main concern, just off the top of my head, and I'll share with you now, is that we have to be careful. On one hand, we want to limit the black market activity, which is already going on, but if we regulate it too much, then people, I think one of the commissioners, I think it was Commissioner Ebinger, said, well, if we eliminate it too much, then people are just going to go back to the black market activity and won't accomplish anything. So I guess the bottom line for me is I think it's probably wise to walk before we run. We can always change it, as the gentleman was saying, tweak it as we go. But rather than move too fast, I'd suggest that we move slow on it and see what happens, and then tweak it, checkpoint fix, as they say in the Air Force. Checkpoint fix as you go. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ken. Do we have anybody online?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Please.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Rory with Public Health, and with the comments today about things will change, the playing field will change over the next months and years. Public Health is certainly concerned about the use of this product, and we would love it if it was considered in a more restrictive manner to start, knowing that things could change, but to protect us, hard to go back if we allow things that less restrictively to start. So we would like to see a conservative approach to start consideration.
Thank you. Just a reminder, we will have a second public hearing after this to discuss the use, public use of cannabis. And I think Public Health has got some inputs on that, too.
I think they'll be presenting that to you all
Yeah.
if you're sick of hearing me today. You're almost done, so.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Move to close the hearing.
I'll second that motion.
A motion is second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we are out of the public hearing.
Question. Mike, once we've had the public hearing, I noticed in some of the packet documentation that there was a time frame that we're supposed to deal with this based on state statute. Going to some of the things that you wanted the board to address, I'm just wondering if we don't have to act on this today, do we?
Correct.
So I guess what I would like to see us do is to maybe have a list of I like the areas where we have it and that it's all under conditional use permit, but in some of the areas that Commissioner Ebringer talked about, could we get more detailed information about the choices you want our board to make, just fine-tuned down to those issues that we could have put in our packet for later, right? And if there's a recommended one over another one.
He did include that.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I can go back, Commissioner.
There's a recommended action.
Okay,
I saw it and I can't find it now.
That's,
It's the last slide on in your packet.
okay, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
A complete finding of fact in order for zoning amendment, and move to recommend the cannabis zoning ordinance tentatively titled Ordinance 2024-1 to the Clay County Board of Commissioners for approval.
there it is.
Yeah. Would that address the concerns that you raised?
That would be classifying it as cultivation, industrial.
Yeah, that would address my concerns.
And is that Commissioner Mojo and the Planning Commission phase, does that coincide with what the Planning Commission believes should be?
I would say that's probably a 50% split on it. There was some substantial dialogue on whether classifying it as industrial was a more conservative or less conservative route, or whether it was ag being conservative or less conservative in regards to control. And so I think I will, from my perspective today, I don't think and I understand all the other components, but given the information in the dialogues and the tables that I've been at, I would have a hard time supporting it as industrial today. And I deeply respect the staff's, getting the staff stuff together. I just really struggle with this being, based on the parameters, the face of Clay County in its industrial zones.
One of the things that occurs to me, you know, a lot of times, and it's overused, but the market will prevail. And if we want to allow agricultural on this, if they meet the standards, the security standards, the fencing, the alarm, cameras, that type of thing, if they want to do it by the acre, as long as we enforce those standards, in a part of the country, it's got about a 6-month growth period. You know, that's probably not the wisest decision. An interior, the way they grow it now, you know, there was a lot of marijuana coming out of Canada for a long time, and they have a shorter growth period than we do, but it was all hydroponic, it was all done in interior settings.
Well, but to that, though, classifying it that way would not limit their ability to have a 30,000 square foot facility. And I think there are facilities in Clay County, Bayer Crop Science, for instance, that are doing testing on seed development as well, have indoor abilities too. So, you know, I get that component. I think it's not just allowing it to be in a field and that's their only use with that.
I guess I'm looking at it from the standpoint of what other product that we allow through production agriculture that we limit it to only industrial use. I get the conservative thing, and I like that, but I guess I'm just wondering what sort of a case is going to be brought before us that says why this one product that's supposedly is in the state of Minnesota is legal to grow, and we're calling it an industrial product. What other ag products do we restrict to industrial? And again, that's where I'm struggling with this, and I look at it more from a standpoint of you know, should we be calling sugar beets industrial?
The reason why staff chose to recommend classifying it as cultivation as industrial and limiting it to the limited highway commercial was a big part of it was the fact that the tax classifications, the way that they had broken it down as even cultivation will be classified as commercial. So that's kind of what pushed us to recommend putting it under that same umbrella.
And again, I guess you could apply Commissioner Campbell's standard to that. What other agricultural product is taxed like that? And that's the state's argument to answer.
That's where I'm kind of going on this. That's, you know, I'm not ready to make that decision today. In terms of that, I think we need to have a little further dialogue. I don't want, as a board member, I don't want to start picking and choosing which agricultural production product is different than another in terms of how you categorize it, whether it's industrial or regular ag production. I think we're going on a slippery slope in that regard, in terms of trying to choose one just because, you know, I mean, obviously it's something that, you know, it's like, I think Commissioner Ebringen mentioned to Frank before our meeting started today, when did you ever think that we would be talking about a cannabis ordinance? But this is new, but it still is something that is tillable, growable, and I just want to make sure we get it right. You know, we had one of our citizens say let's take it slow. I want to take it slow and get this right. I just as soon, at least, if we want to put it on for next week, and we have another hearing coming up, and there might be additional questions based on that, but I would like us to defer action on the ordinance 2024-1, at least until next week, when we have some more time to debate.
You would want to build the timeline in there, Commissioner Campbell, in your motion. The notice for a June 25th, 2024 public hearing notice would need to be provided to the county newspaper by June 6th. So we've got a timeline, it's not
We
one.
meet June 4th, so.
Yeah. And we've got to have the ordinance completed by,
Well, there's some, July 1st is sort of an important date, and as far as some of the state statutes and being enacted and going into effect, I've not seen anything in my research of the bill that indicates that it's some sort of hard deadline that we miss something. But given the question marks and some of the uncertainties around it, I think it would be wise to have something done before July 1st, but perhaps not totally necessary.
I think if we ask staff to give us, if we give some clear requirements for information, we could discuss this. Does it have to be a public hearing? No. We've had a public hearing.
We've had the public hearing, Mr. Chair, and essentially this is just an opportunity for you all to gather more information to help you make a political decision. So, and I think this is something that Mr. Jacobson anticipated might be the board's wishes today. So this would not be an ambush of more information. I think that was something he was thinking might happen.
I think one of the primary aspects of what this board is being asked to do is that very first bullet point there. And I think it's critical that we take the appropriate time, and whether it's one more week. And Mr. Chair, with that, I would move that we table any decision on the action regarding the requested approval of the resolution be tabled till Tuesday, June 4th.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Commissioner Mojo, did you have a comment you
I
wanted?
think once it's tabled, I don't know if I can.
Oh, true. Okay, we'll move on to motion to table. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion is tabled till next week. Commissioner Mojo, do you have anything you want to add to this? This is your committee.
I mean, can we do that motion before we close the hearing? Did we close the?
We did.
You closed. Yeah.
Oh, we're closed already?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay. I'll wake up.
okay. Why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we'll move on to the next cannabis-related public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm going to call us back into session. Next up on the agenda, we've got a public hearing for cannabis public use ordinance. Got Jason McCoy with us from Public Health. And Jason, I'm just turning it over to you. Oh, no, this is a public hearing, so I will
Move to
entertain.
open the hearing.
Do we have a second? Okay, a motion to open a public hearing on public use for cannabis public use ordinance. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, public hearing is open. We'll start off with Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully this will be a lot simpler for you guys. We have a much shorter ordinance. We got the draft for this particular ordinance from the Association of Minnesota Counties. Quite a few counties across Minnesota have already passed it, including within, and cities as well, I should say, including Barnesville has already passed this for themselves, and I know some of the other cities are looking at it as well. Just as a point of reference, we started from the fact that, as we know, the state has passed the ability to use cannabis and cannabis flower, and that started August of 2023. And so this is our attempt to move forward with controlling where use is. According to state statute, use cannot happen anywhere where the Minnesota Clean Indoor Air Act covers. So indoors of, say, a school or a restaurant or a public building like this. Use anywhere else, though, is allowed. And so with this recommendation that we have for you with this ordinance, I'll just kind of walk through it real quick. We try to keep it as simple as possible. In the purpose and intent, the only modification we made was in the second sentence where we changed to Chapter 342, which is the current chapter within the state statute. So just keeping along with state statute. And then under definitions, both A and B had made reference to cannabis flower or cannabis products that were approved by an office, and it didn't clarify, so we put the clarification that Office of Cannabis Management is who will make those clarifications going forward. So really the definitions are just stating what the product is and making it very clear for any of our citizens as well. Hemp-derived products are exactly according to state statute, as is the lower potency hemp edibles too that you find on page 2 of the ordinance. Public place and public accommodation are the two main pieces to pay attention to with this, because this is where use would be limited to. So a public place, I know that you guys can read, but just for anyone that's listening, I'll just say we're talking about public parks or trails, public streets, sidewalks, any enclosed indoor area that's used by the general public, including but not limited to theaters, restaurants, bars, food establishments, places licensed to sell intoxicating liquor, wine, or malt beverages, retail businesses, gyms, common areas and buildings, public shopping areas, auditoriums, arenas, or other places of public accommodation, which rolls into H, which is a place of public accommodation as a business, a refreshment, entertainment, recreation, or transportation facility of any kind whose goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations are extended, offered, sold, or otherwise made available in public. The exceptions to public place and public accommodation on page 3 are provided by state statute. So that is your personal yard, curtilage, which for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, I didn't know curtilage was a word until this state statute came out. That's a shed or a building that's on your yard. So private property as well that's not generally accessible. And then on the premises of an establishment or event licensed to permit on-site consumption. So that would be those micro or meso businesses that were referred to in the last ordinance, or a particular event that would have to come to you for accountability. So those were, if you remember back to my last presentation, there are events allowed, kind of like a beer garden. If someone wanted to have something like that at a particular event, they would have to come before you as a board and actually ask permission and give you, like, this is how we're going to secure them. This is how we're going to make sure that juveniles don't get into these, just like they would with a beer garden and stuff. So that is the limitations. I would like to make a note, because I thought more and talked to some people. We had in our conversations last week, there was something I had maybe naively said that you can make this a nutshell of you can smoke or vape marijuana on your yard or in your personal on your personal property, but nowhere else. And we talked about parking lots and what does that mean? And actually a parking lot wouldn't be covered by this. So because while it is a place of public accommodation, there is clean air blowing through it and such like that. So we were wondering if we would be forcing a business to not, or to try to enforce something that they maybe didn't want to. And so they wouldn't be forced to do that if they didn't want to. And so with that said, smoking includes the smoking and vaping. We included the language in there to cover both of those. And then that moves into the prohibited act of smoking or vaping at a place where we have just defined, and then includes a penalty that is up to $300 for this, which is allowable by state statute as well. So that is the definitions that we have put into our ordinance, and I will stop talking so you can ask questions.
Questions for Jason? Commissioner Campbell?
Can you just go over that parking lot issue?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was wondering if I should even bring it up or not, but when we were having discussions as a large group of the directors and such, we were wondering, what would this mean if you went to, say, a bar or a restaurant and you wanted to step outside and vape your THC? Would this ordinance say that you cannot do that? And the reference that we used was, what if it was a regular cigarette and a person stepped outside of the business? There's nothing in state statute that says that you cannot smoke. We don't even have a setback of 20 feet for smoking or vaping in Minnesota. So why would we say that you would get in trouble if it was THC? And so we had kind of that conversation. What would it mean? And ultimately, what we were thinking through was this would give an owner the ability to say, I don't want that in my parking lot, and they could put up their own sign. But this would not be something that we would have to, as a county, enforce in a parking lot.
That would be different than a parking lot that is tied to public soccer fields.
Correct.
So those are
Because that would be a youth accommodation at that point in time. And that is in state.
or an adult soccer complex.
Or an adult soccer complex, absolutely. Or our parking lot right out here.
Yeah.
So, yes, because the public comes and goes,
So
absolutely.
those that would not be allowed.
Right.
When we had this discussion last week, I don't think you were there, Kevin, but I had a sudden memory of last AMC conference last December. Four of us were walking back from dinner on Nicollet Mall, and we walked by one of the pubs there, and it was a circle of professional-looking young women vaping and smoking a joint with a police car right there. And I didn't see it as a disturbance, and I'm old. They seemed to be having conversation and enjoying their product. And I asked one of them, it was more fun because there was a police car right there, and she said, yeah. But this is not going to be, when it's legal in the state, the only consideration we need to give on the bars is what does the owner want to do? Yeah. Obviously, they can't smoke inside. Obviously, they can't smoke in the doorway. And we need to give them the leverage to post our ordinance here and the smoke-free ordinance on their door to keep, if they have families coming in and they don't want this going on, give them the leverage to do it. If it's not a problem to the owner there and they're complying with this ordinance and with the smoke-free ordinance, indeed, that's not a place you want to have a police officer have to try and enforce something. So, and I agree with what's been presented in this ordinance on use. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, Jason, maybe can you touch base if the board were to move forward with this ordinance, how it would impact other municipalities?
Absolutely. So this would cover our unincorporated areas that we cover as well. So each city would have to pass this themselves if they wanted it inside their municipality too. going back to whenever I made the rounds, each city was very interested. I will say Barnesville has already passed this themselves, and others were interested, but they wanted to see what the county was so that they didn't become little islands amongst us. But if I shook a magic 8 ball, I do believe we'll see just a whole flurry of these happen in a row right behind us.
Anything further, Jason? Do we have anybody from the public that wants to address this issue? Kent? And just be sure to identify yourself and give your address too, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. That we need to obviously honor the state statute. And again, I'd rather be, the question I have, I guess, I would pose to you, and I would like the answer to myself as a citizen, is can the unincorporated areas, or can the city of Moorhead or the city of Dilworth, can they make an ordinance that's more restrictive than what we make? Can they make an ordinance that's less restrictive? So they can, basically, they don't care what you guys are going to do. That answers my question.
My understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can make ordinances that are more restrictive. They cannot make ordinances that are less restrictive. Correct?
That's generally correct. I mean, we don't want to be in the position here of giving legal advice to the cities. If they have a different opinion about what they want to do, that's going to be up to the very city.
But generally, in regards to planning issues, when those things come, townships, municipalities, generally that's the case, that they have the ability to go more restrictive, not less.
Any other member of the public, or Steve, do we have anybody online?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, or Commissioner Mojo?
Thank you, and I'm not wanting to get on a soapbox, but, and again, I appreciate Mr. Lucier's perspective. I really do, I'm paused because I feel like we spend so much time in regards to smoking cessation and making sure that we are informing young people about those components. So we spend so much time on smoking, and now we're spending time on this perspective. As a mom of 4 kiddos, that's tricky for me. I do want to say, and I think we've done a good job of capturing our concerns in this, so thank you for the work. It is really challenging as a mom of young kids that has a 13-year-old that can walk by something and say, that smells like pot. And that's not something that I think was in the wheelhouse of a lot of young people, a decade or more ago. And so that's tricky. And there are some unintended, that can affect folks that are walking by it and smelling it just as much as it could affect someone that's using it. And so I want to make sure that we're addressing that in this, and I'm not taking a stance on for or against. I just think it's important that that's for the record put in there.
Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, I appreciate the concerns too regarding youth. It's I'll tell you what, the trends today. We got a few of us that are a little bit older sitting up here compared to what it was years ago. I just saw yesterday on a news report now that, that daily use of cannabis is greater than alcohol on a daily basis by the majority of adults. And, you know, so I think the education process is important out there that deals with, especially when it comes to our children. But at the same point in time, I do think it's important that we establish boundaries the best we can, and I think those boundaries have been outlined here in this ordinance. Unlike the other ordinance that I still have some questions on in terms of, you know, how we categorize that product. This one, I think, is clear that it's a step in the direction that we need to take. And I guess I'm going to support this ordinance as you've proposed it.
One of the things I like about this ordinance, we discussed this last week, we've got to, and we use the analogy mom, but I've taken my kids to the playground a lot of times. We need to give parents or responsible adults the ability, just like we need to give business owners, to say, no, don't do this. If somebody's vaping in front of your kid, when you take them to the playground, you need to be able to say, stop that. And they need to go, if I don't, the police can get called and I can get a fine, and I could get in trouble. And, you know, that's a reasonable restriction that we live with just to be citizens. Is there are laws, and if they're reasonable, we're expected to obey them. And this is, I think, is a reasonable ordinance, so I'm in support of it too. Any further comments? Ms. Lucier?
I'm sorry, I only come to these. There, I guess you can hear me. Yeah, I do have a question, perhaps you guys do too. Does the state ordinance have a setback thing at all? Would it be possible for the county to include a setback from a doorway of 20 feet or however many feet? I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I'm inclined to think it is. Is that something that you would like to consider? That's just my question.
It's possible. Moorhead has a 20-foot setback on smoking. I have not heard that they've updated it to include THC products at this point in time. But the rest of Minnesota, there's only a few municipalities that have put a setback in as far as the use rates.
What is the standardized setback? I mean, you do this work, you have colleagues, what is the standardized setback?
20 feet.
So, and again, I'm government buildings, we have rules that you gotta be 20 feet from the door out here, don't we? I thought we did.
You don't
Or can't even
smoke on
at
this
all.
campus.
You can't even smoke at all. You gotta go to the sidewalk. Public sidewalks, you can do it.
Yes.
But in terms of a private business, is there such rules out there in a bar or restaurant that says they can't smoke 20 feet from their door?
You can. As example, the entire state of North Dakota has that written into their century code. And then Moorhead followed that since Fargo had. So Moorhead does have a 20-foot setback. It's an interesting thing to enforce because you have to choose, I mean, are you going to tape off 20 feet and things like that? Having worked in smoke-free housing, we get a lot of calls related to that as well. So it is something that is legal to do and possible to do.
Does it? I'm sorry. Didn't Public Health institute, though, a outdoor smoking policy that businesses had to, so in other words, if they were going to have a designated smoking area, it had to be confined, and it had to not have a roof on it, or it had to have, right? That exists today, doesn't it?
Okay, that is two different pieces. So here at Clay County, we do have a company policy that you can't, that we have a tobacco-free grounds. That is available. In state statute, under Minnesota Clean Indoor Air, they do have a very defined space of what a smoker's space would be to keep it from being enclosed. And I think that's what you're referring to. So like, no more than 50% of the wall can be actual solid wall. Otherwise it goes all the way down to how fine the mesh can be. And it can't have a ceiling either. So that was, for example, if a bar or restaurant wanted to include a smoker's area right off the,
They could go out a door and it'd be enclosed.
right, but it would only be like a little bit, so it would be like a wind shelter, but it would not be so enclosed that the smoke would stay inside, and compound itself.
Okay, I knew there was something there that,
If we included in any motion on this, that it include a 20-foot setback, that would be easily incorporated into the ordinance.
Absolutely. We have that language, it could easily be put in.
I don't think it's, I think it's a good suggestion. That bar scenario we talked about, that allows them to post something on the wall outside the door where if somebody just absolutely needs to go vape or smoke marijuana, they get in the parking lot and people don't have to walk their kids by them as they go through the door. Once again, it would empower them to have something to fall back on, or the average citizen.
and I think that's a good thing too, but then I start thinking about, okay, the policing of it, and whose responsibility of it. And when we talk about a $300 fine, is the $300 fine gonna then be on the property owner because somebody was allowed to be 20 feet from there? Or is it gonna be, is the fine gonna be on the person who's complained to be using it 20 feet from the door?
Excellent question on that. We
We have to know we have to think of all these things.
Absolutely, we would want to define that for sure, because you wouldn't want the owner, unless
I don't want them policing it and having to deal with
Right.
it and being subject to a $300 fine because a customer decides they want to smoke 10 feet from their door.
Right, absolutely.
I think the ordinance is enforced now for tobacco, both in Fargo and Moorhead, and I speak to this with some experience. It is the owner who generally initiates the complaint. The onus would be on the person who's perpetrating. The ordinance would say that you cannot smoke within 20 feet of a doorway. It doesn't say you cannot authorize someone or permit someone to smoke on your property within 20 feet. It says you will not do this act within 20 feet of the door. And I can say with some assurance that if somebody is out there driving around the patrol car looking for somebody to be within 20 feet of a door, smoking a cigarette or vaping or smoking a marijuana joint, they're way too busy. And if a supervisor didn't end up talking to them, a judge or a county attorney would and say, what's your point here? The reality of the situation is this gives that owner a mechanism where you can say, don't do that, or I'll call the police. And he's not just, as we say, blowing smoke.
Yes, yes,
And it gives them something they can post.
yes.
I think it's a good suggestion.
And again, I don't have any trouble with the 20 feet, but I think the reality is I don't know of too many business owners who are going to call the cops on their customers
Yeah.
for being outside smoking. They have more important things and busier things to do than that as well. But it becomes the issue of the irritated citizen who has to walk by it and doesn't like it that will make the complaint. That's where the likely thing is to happen. And so who does the complaint go to under this? Do they go in and do they tell the owner? And the owner says, well, it's a policy that, that the county has, but it's got to be enforced by law enforcement, not by, those are the things it's important dialogue to have on this. That if you're going to put that 20 feet in there, don't put the responsibility on the business owner to have to deal with it.
I would say, to what Commissioner Ebinger said, every place that I've worked with that has had a 20-foot setback, exactly what he mentioned. Law enforcement isn't trolling by bars and restaurants.
I hope not.
I mean, there's way other things to do. And then you are completely right. It really comes down to the particular owner, if they want to enforce it or not. I've never heard of an owner getting a fine for someone else smoking or vaping. The only time I've ever heard of something happening like that was when the particular owner was just like, forget that, I'm going to do what I want to do. And then they were in trouble with the state because of clean indoor air, not with the particular city. So when a complaint happens, if it's an annoyed citizen, usually it's me that gets that call first, and then I will call law enforcement and say, this is what I heard, and let them deal with it as they wish to. But by that time that they could even get there, usually the people are gone.
Right.
What we do find instead, though, is signs prop up these policies. And so, like what Commissioner Ebinger said, they post something outside on their door or outside on the eating patio. We're moving into that wonderful time of year when we get to do that until the mosquitoes show up. But it allows those signs to be there, and people follow the signs. There may be a few rough bumps here and there. The same thing when we think about tobacco-free parks. I've passed so many tobacco-free parks policies in the last 9 years, and not once has law enforcement been called to try to chase somebody out of the park because they were vaping. Generally, it's been, a citizen, a mom and dad, or even sometimes the kids who will be like, hey, you're not allowed to do that there. And the people are like, oh, okay. And they move because we have a rich history of everywhere going back to smoke-free laws where that's what we did. We put up a sign, and now people will make sure that they're enforced. I'm not arguing for or against. From public health, we love the setbacks. They do become part of the norm. They are a big help, especially when you think about all of the times when it's cold. I don't want to right now, but if you think about when it's freezing outside, and if someone just steps right outside and starts using THC or smoking, right, in that little entrance area, and then you have to walk right through that cloud. We used to talk about, and it's still a thing, you're inhaling the nicotine if we're talking about vaping and the other chemicals. But with this, you'd be inhaling an addictive property too. And if kids are sitting there waiting for their bus, that becomes a bigger deal too. So just to add the public health.
Put it short, I guess I don't have any trouble with it, but if we're going to do that, I just think that penalty, that $300, it needs to be emphasized that who's that going to be on? And it should not be the business.
You can do that by the prohibited act. The actus rei, do I remember my graduate school? The act itself that's criminal would be what's controlled, and that is you will be subject to the ordinance if you are smoking marijuana or smoking or vaping a cannabis product within 20 feet of the door. The manager in there who maybe said, it doesn't bother me, doesn't have the right to exempt people from obeying the ordinance. And that would not be something that would proceed in court.
Which is exactly what's written in the prohibited acts. If we took it out, if we take the exact same person that was 20 feet outside and put them inside, if they were just sitting in the theater and decided they wanted to, use THC while they were watching a movie or something, and law enforcement was called because they wouldn't stop, the owner would not get a fine. That person would be the person that gets the fine. So it has to be the user. That's actually written already into our prohibited act, so it would satisfy that.
I think that's an important item, if someone's just walking down the sidewalk along a building that's got that sign up there, and this guy has nothing to do with going into that bar or whatever the case may be. I don't know how he could be fined for that ordinance or whatever, that sign being up. He wasn't even aware of that sign being up if he's walking down the sidewalk with smoking marijuana or whatever.
Once again, I completely understand what you're saying on that, and I don't see law enforcement, I don't see a citizen just trying to pick on somebody that way. I think this will be when people congregate. If you're just walking down the sidewalk, we don't know if it's a THC or if it's a nicotine vape. Law enforcement's not going to stop and ask you, what are you smoking, sir? I think, but if that same person stops regularly at a kid's bus stop, for example, and just stands there because I don't know why they would want to, but then the school bus driver or a mom or someone might want to complain and say, hey, can someone check this out for us?
Yeah, it just feels 20 feet thing is tough to enforce.
Well, I'm looking at section 3 in the prohibited acts, and if 1 and 2 under that deal with the person and not the business, then it probably is already covered. Concern that I would have in terms of a business potentially being fined. That's not the intent.
We simply need to specify within prohibited acts, smoking or vaping within 20 feet of a doorway. Anything else? Any other questions? Entertain a motion to move out of public hearing.
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, we're out of the public hearing. I would entertain a motion if someone wants to move to enact this ordinance and with any stipulations that or additions to it.
Do we want to move ahead with this one if we're not going to move ahead on the other one?
Well, I guess we could wait and do them both next week, I suppose.
Okay.
Oh, we're not seeking any new information on this
Right,
one,
I
are we?
think from a tabled perspective, generally you're seeking additional information, and so.
Totally separate ordinances. They're not related in any way.
The only thing would be is if there was the suggested addition of the 20 feet, then we should probably,
That could be contained in the motion.
Well, frequently at planning and zoning, when we have the planning commission and there are any components that are added to, once you've had a public hearing and it's been advertised for the public to be there, you're able to add conditions onto that.
Was there any 20-foot definition now in this? There isn't.
Not on this. There is within City of Moorhead and the entire state of North Dakota for tobacco use, so it's not an uncharted territory.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the 2024 Clay County Cannabis Public Use Ordinance 2024-2. And I have a comment if we have a second.
I'll second that.
Okay,
The question is, because, one, is it okay that it's 2024-2 because we didn't act on the other?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mojo, it would need to be amended to number 1.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, if I might amend my motion to the number to make it 2024-1.
okay.
I'll go along with that amendment.
And then my other comment is, I really feel like we are in uncharted waters in regards to how this will affect our citizens in Clay County, because this is such a new component and there's so many things changing in regards to oversight at the state. And so my hope is that I really do feel like there should be some sort of buffer for public spaces, but because we're really not sure how this will all work. And I'm not a fan of adding conditions that are impossible to regulate either. And my hope is that if something comes up where this becomes an issue, this board will be responsive to public concern and tweak it, such as the comments on the prior public hearing.
Any other comments? I think anything we do in this is going to be a work in progress. People with the state are saying, well, they're not, creating the wheel. Other states have been through it and they can see the problems and adjust to it. We're going to have the same mind about both of these ordinances. It's going to be a work in progress. Yes.
You have one further. I think that it's really important for those in the public that are really concerned about this to be really vocal to the representatives in St. Paul that made this law. We are, as said earlier, doing the best we can to make sure there is some sort of framework for appropriate use in Clay County, and it is our due diligence to let the folks know in St. Paul when things aren't working or may not be working. There may be great components to this, but we're just doing what we can to create that framework locally. We are not responsible for allowing this to have happened.
Any other comments? Have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Ordinance 2024-1, controlling public hearing for cannabis public use, it has passed. If we could, for our tabled item, be sure that we've got to change that ordinance number for next week. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd just like to extend thank you to a number of our departments, obviously Public Health on this item with Jason leading the way and Rory and Kathy, and also our County Attorney's Office. We've also had the Sheriff's Department, Human Resources. And so while we've been making a real big push here the last month or so, it's been something that we've been talking about for roughly 6 months, so we appreciate everyone's efforts.
Indeed. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have Quinn Yeager, Social Service Director, newly installed. Request approval to replace an office support specialist due to resignation.
Thank you. Morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Hope to have something a little bit lighter than what you guys just sat. A little easier. Tough day. Yes, we recently had a resignation in office support down on first floor in the Financial Services Division. This is an already budgeted position. I think of note, something that should be important is this position down in Financial Services is often the first person that the public comes in and sees. So it's very important, very critical that we keep that position there to kind of create that welcoming environment and really be able to answer all the questions that the public may have about benefits or anything else, any other department within our agency as well. So I am hoping to request the approval to replace this office support specialist and any backfill if there's an internal appointment.
Very good. Any questions?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comment? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. You're batting 1,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now, next up, request approval to appoint a temporary lead eligibility worker in the Financial Service Division.
Thank you. This is a little bit of a unique situation, so I'd like to explain it. If you haven't noticed, in the last probably 4 to 6 weeks, we've come to board to request several positions in financial services be filled, and with that, we are looking at being down 4 full-time staff, all on the healthcare team. A little daunting. We have done the hiring for that. Went quite well. We selected all the candidates and are looking to have all of those staff be replaced kind of at the beginning of early to mid-June. With that, when it comes to the quality of training, it would be a tall order, I would say, for any one person to train 4 people. with the extent of knowledge that's needed in these programs to be effective. And one of the things that I believe very strongly in is that training and good quality training helps prevent turnover in the first place, which is kind of where this idea came from. We do have a lead worker on the healthcare team right now. However, that lead worker will be going on FMLA for approximately 6 weeks, also starting right when the 4 new hires are projected to start. So kind of planets aligning not in our favor there. However, we do have an idea that we'd like to present to the board, as we have one staff in particular who has kind of shown some leadership already and some training. We would like to temporarily appoint that eligibility worker to a temporary lead position to help with the onboarding and the training of that. Not only to cover the FMLA leave, but also to kind of help out on the fact that there would be 4 people that are being trained at one time. So even if the lead was back and not on FMLA, that would still be quite daunting. We did a cost impact analysis for this. It will be about a $3,000 increase. However, 50% of that can be claimed through FFP. And the other 50% we can utilize our healthcare unwinding money for, so there will be no impact on the current budget to make this change happen. I guess I'm open for any questions that you may have, but I would request that our motion to approve the temporary lead worker be approved.
We discussed this at PIC, and I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. You're
Yes.
still batting 1,000.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, did we include backfill on his prior ask? It's in the memo, but I don't recall.
I know I asked, I'm not sure.
I just don't recall this board.
Who made that motion?
Well, I could be a separate, I would make a separate motion to the previous request for approval to replace an office support specialist to include backfill.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes. Thank you, Commissioner Mojo, for catching that. Okay, have one committee report left, and that's me. All right, on the 21st, which was Tuesday, I attended the PIC meeting with the issues that we've just covered and that Frank covered in his report. Later that day, I attended the Greater Fargo Moorhead EDC Executive Committee meeting. We reviewed the audit and the Form 990, reviewed the regional growth plan. The item that we've been interested in on governance, possible changes to the executive committee will be covered by the newly formed committee in about a month or two. So we're still waiting on an answer on that. Wednesday, the 22nd, I attended the Cannabis Ordinance update that we've covered here in depth today. Later that day, I attended the Northwest Emergency Communication Board remotely. Just some general business covered there, covered some funding issues for training that they had in the area. And the Emergency Communication Network is looking for a new director, and we discussed the potential of hires there. Later that day, I attended the HSCM training that was reported on earlier by Frank. And following that, I attended the Moorhead Fargo Diversion Authority Finance meeting, which was remote. Didn't cover a whole lot. We do have coming up in the near future, some milestone payments that we're going to have to discuss, and then we approve some contracts. On Thursday, the 23rd, I attended the Heartland Trail Study. Commissioner Gross covered that really well, and I'm going to embarrass him. I'm going to say something he didn't like because it's nice about him. This committee hasn't met in 3.5 years, and you knew more than the people presenting it on where we were and what status things were. And you are going to be missed in a lot of places after next year. We're going to be wishing Frank was around to tell us what's going on, but you brought a lot to that meeting. And later that day, I attended the Diversion Authority meeting, which was covered by Commissioner Campbell. And that completes my report. Steve, what do you got for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last Tuesday, I participated in the PIC meeting that's been addressed. One thing of note, we did talk about, again, the consent agenda items for hires of positions that are already in the budget. And so we may have an additional discussion on that coming up. Highway tracking, has been covered by today's board action. On the 22nd, participate in the Cannabis Ordinance discussion. Again, want to thank the board for the thoughtful discussion today, and we'll have some additional information for you next week. The 22nd, also participated in the SEM training module. Again, appreciate their support in bringing that training to us. I believe we'll have another training, not this week, but next week, to complete the 4 modules. That afternoon, I went to the proclamation reading and groundbreaking at Dilworth Fire Station. That was good to see. I talked with Representative Joy on the update from the legislation. He had anticipated that he'd be willing to come to this commission and kind of give some oversight of the session here in the near future. On 23rd, participated in SWAC that's been covered, also the MCC JPA meeting. On the Friday, participated in the MACA legislative call, an update there. Again, and Matt Hilgart has been with AMC for 10 years, and he said this was the most interesting, challenging legislative session that he's been a part of. And then, yes, on Friday afternoon, I did have a meeting with a concerned citizen about some issue they had at the DMV that we're working through. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Leisure, anything?
Mr. Melton had a evidentiary hearing in a criminal matter this morning, so he's not here, but he didn't give me anything else to report other than what we've discussed in depth earlier. Thank you.
Thank you for the work you and your office have put in on these ordinances. It's going to be an ongoing thing, as we said, so we appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Aaron, anything? And Sarah? Boy, then we're adjourned.